If you could see yourself doing anything else, go do that and keep the joy of music, and don't feel like you failed just because you didn't do it full time. Like if you have a day job and you're doing music at night, you're still an artist. I really believe this with my full bones. Everyone has to do what they need to do to pay their bills. You're not less of an artist just because you do a day job.
Hello everyone, this is Rodney Veal, the host of Rodney Veal's Inspired By, and today our guest on the show is someone that I just met, but I did my homework and my research. She is a fabulous songwriter, composer, arranger, Grammy award-winning artist, super cool, and loves to protect the environment, which I love that about her. Nicole Zuraitis.
Nailed it. Hi, Rodney.
I nailed the name. Yes.
Nailed it.
Yeah, I love it. Nicole, thank you so much for doing this, because I know that you're performing tonight. So, the fact that, I get it. You got to do prep work for performing. But what's super cool to me is the fact that there was a moment, but we're going to get to the hot tub time machine moment in a second. But there was something, and there was a small documentary film that I saw online where you said, yeah, I applied for the Sarah Vaughan vocal competition, and I love this about the fact that probably shouldn't have talked about Van Halen and the Pretenders. And I thought to myself, yeah, don't anger the jazz purist.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if we're gonna go there immediately from the get-go, let's go.
Let's go there.
I'm in.
So I'm like, is it in the music world? Is it the same thing? Like in the visual art world or the dance world, there are people like, do not cross streams.
Oh my gosh. Wow, I love that we're going there, because this is something I'm extremely passionate about now that I've found a little bit of footing in my own confidence. Because for the majority of my life, I didn't have any confidence in myself. So when I was creating very unique art and it wasn't getting a lot of traction, instead of looking inwards and saying, I believe that this is good, I was looking outwards and assuming that it wasn't good because it wasn't getting traction. And so that has changed a little bit in me, and so now I can speak very freely about what you just mentioned, which is like the purist issue and the boxing of arts.
Yes, okay, go.
So what I find, especially in this 90-second world that we live in, the Instagram and TikTok world of 90 seconds, is that everybody has an attention span of 30 to 90 seconds, and so as that started taking off and people started taking off through social media, it really was wild for me to think that the music that I was making had legs to stand on. And so when we live in this world of 30 to 90 seconds, it became very restrictive for unique artists who have a lot to say and a lot more time. And so I started to look at how my art could level up against, a playlist algorithm, as opposed to what I just wanted to create. And that's how Love Begins was created. I wrote the music within a box, because jazz, for so many years, kind of said, she's not really a jazz singer, she's a rock singer. She likes Van Halen. She says it out loud. She loves Blood, Sweat, and Tears. She loves Stevie Wonder. She loves classical music, and she plays the trombone and she plays the piano. We don't know what to do with her. And so it was really tricky for me for so many years, because I was doing the most difficult thing, which was writing music that was original to me, that nobody can compare what I sound like to someone who's already existed. And when there's no comparison to be made, she doesn't sound like Ella, she doesn't sound like Sarah, she doesn't sound like Carmen, she doesn't sound like Anita. So where are they going to put me? It's a very hard thing for people within this jazz, especially, and other genres.
Other genres, yeah.
When there's no comparison, right, they don't know what to do. But I think that there's so much beauty in the cracks, and that is where the true innovation happens for music.
That is...
and arts.
And it was so true. And that was what I discovered as well. And, that similar sort of, it's in the cracks. and that categorization. I mean, how often do we have these conversations with somebody who's in another art form? Where we spill the tea. And so we basically say, yeah, there's some purists who, it's everywhere. I'm here to tell you, Nicole, is every art form and every artist I've ever talked to on the show has always been that question. What, you don't really fit in this box. You're not quite, and they always, when they finally made the decision to say, I'm not going to worry about the box. I'm not going to worry about trying to be categorized. I'm going to do my stuff. I'm just going to do it.
Right.
That's when the breakthroughs happen.
Right.
And that provides so much joy. And so
it's also the most scary footing, because when I adhered to the box and I like won a Grammy, I was like, oh, that's so strange. But then I'm writing music that again is nebulous in genre, and I feel like I'm taking away the rug that I built for myself to finally stand on, and I'm like pulling it again. But the interesting thing for me is that even after I was given this accolade of like best jazz vocal album, I didn't write the album thinking I'm going to win a Grammy. That's ridiculous.
No one ever does that.
Especially as an independent artist,
And no one ever thinks about winning, like, because I always use the phrase "chase excellence, not gold."
Oh, I love that.
And
Yes.
so you're not. I tell people, like, we're not here. That's not our agenda. That's not your. It wasn't your agenda. And then this happens, and so I just loved it. When I said, I laughed out loud when you said Van Halen and Pretenders. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to add that back into my playlist as I'm making my art, because Nicole's in that world as well. And I mean, did you always know music was your thing? Like like I said, Hot Tub Time Machine now.
Yeah.
A lot of, I mean, it just starts. When sound, especially sound, that's a different, especially vocals. When did you go, oh, this is the beautiful land with a yellow brick road that I want to be in?
Oh, I love that. I always leaned on music to like help heal me, even from like a young age. And the strange thing is that like I could not actually phonate my vocal cords the way that I wanted to at a young age. I wanted to sing Whitney Houston. I wanted to be the lead in the musical. I wanted to belt. I couldn't actually make that sound with my voice. It just didn't do it. So I always had this big dream that I was singing for big audiences and being, I don't know, the center stage. But what I was actually living was, being the funny friend, or playing the trombone and being an awkward teenager, middle schooler. But the music part was so easy for me, like hearing harmony, playing by ear, acting. It was just, that always came so easy. And so that's why I chose to do music for a living, because I thought if I get a gift from whoever we get gifts for, God, the Almighty, whatever we want to call it, it would be such a waste to not pursue it. At least give it the good old-fashioned try. So that's why I decided to pursue music. I'm 40 now.
Oh,
still doing the thing.
Hey, you're rocking it as someone who just turned 60. Keep it going.
Okay, I wish I was a choreographer, because if I look like it when I'm 60,
I am grateful for the gene pool. I thank you, Sherman and Lois. I thank them every day. And so this, like, because the thing is, it's not even just that you pursued it, and like, but you also talked about the fact that you were what was the phrase? Recovering opera singer. I did do my homework.
You really did.
It's like, that is hilarious to me. Like your language, I was like, I'm gonna love this interview. Recovered opera singer. So did you go to school and train to be an opera? Wow.
So that same voice that I mentioned that wanted to belt and be the star really did well with classical training. And I was super fortunate to have a wonderful voice teacher that lived in my hometown that my parents had me work with. Her name was Laura Mashburn, and she was focused on the health of the voice, not the end goal. She was like, how do we build you a strong foundation? And through her training, I suddenly was like excelling at classical music, and there's always going to be a little thread through this interview of me having doubt within myself. And so I was like, well, I'm doing really well in classical. Maybe I'll be an opera singer. Next thing you know, I'm at NYU studying to be an opera singer full time.
Wow.
Had another amazing voice teacher there, Diana Heldman. I did programs in Italy as a scholarship. It was just like a wild little piece of my life, 6 years of my life, where I was like, I'm an opera singer now. But I was always practicing in the back rooms, in the practice rooms, like Carole King songs and Nina Simone, and my teachers would walk by and go, "What are you doing? You can't sing both because the techniques are different."
Okay. I do understand. Like, explain that, because I think a lot of people don't really.
Yeah, like the classical voice is meant to be sung unamplified, whereas the jazz pop, that you sing it into a microphone, and so you're using the internal structure of your mouth, right, and your vocal cords in completely different ways. So the big turnaround for me was, I was a year out of college. I had to move home to be a waitress because it was too expensive to, take voice lessons and try and do young artist programs. We just did, it don't come from money. So like you have to just figure it out. So I come home.
Yeah, those are practical considerations.
Yeah, exactly.
You probably have parents like mine who were like, okay, are you going to start paying for yourself?
Exactly. Yep, done now. And I went back. I was cast in a show, and then I went back the next year, and I had been doing a lot more jazz show because the jazz shows were paying me money. I was being paid to sing the Great American Songbook in the back of a restaurant or in the back of a pizza parlor. I would get $50 and a pizza, and I was like, "This is awesome," and I'm doing tons of jazz. And then I go back the next year, and the guy, the same director, is like, "What happened to your middle voice?" Because I was singing like, lady, instead of it's like a completely different vibe.
Totally. And they were like, "What's happened?"
They're like, "What has happened to you?"
Turn to the other side. I mean,
yeah,
that's not the wildest thing. I mean, we're good. Midwestern weather. It's wild.
It's weird. It's like I'm having allergies.
Yeah, we call it sinus valley. It's real. It's real.
Okay.
'Cause I just got back from Palm Springs, and I was like clear, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, I'm like,
what the?
good.
2 days after I got back, I'm like, what the heck is this crap?
That makes me feel a lot better.
I was like, I need to get back to Palm Springs. Well, can't afford it.
Yeah,
Pay
exactly.
that one off.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, ThinkTV. So this is this. So you're gigging. You're doing that thing that I think every artist, especially musical artists, and did you think and then you talked about the demon of doubt.
Mm.
Were you thinking, okay, I'm only doing these type of gigs? Is this really a life? Is this really the pathway? I mean, what were you what's going in your head?
I thought that way for like 13 years, as I did those 5 nights a week. I would always think, is this it? This is what I'm doing here. But then I would always think about this ladder theory that I kind of invented in my brain. And the ladder theory is...
I'm intrigued.
It was like the way to think about things in a hopeful way is that when I moved back to the city in 2009, and I decided I was no longer an opera singer and I wanted to try my hand at being a jazz singer. So I moved and I didn't have any work. So the first step on the ladder was find a job. So I was a hostess at Sarah Beth's. And then the next step on the ladder was like, okay, find a job within music while still staying at Sarah Beth's. So I started teaching music, driving door to door while also teaching at Sarah Beth's. I was like, okay, what if I got rid of Sarah Beth's and just did teaching and found another way? There's another ladder step. So I was like, I applied for a wedding band. Next thing you know, I'm in a wedding band and I'm teaching. And I was like, what if I get rid of the door-to-door teaching? The next step is just do the wedding band and then private lessons. And then, step by step, I was like, well, now I really want to play at this club. So I want to play at the Sugar Bar on 72nd Street. Great. What's the next step from there? I want to play at Rockwood down in the Village. Okay, now what I want a residency. Next step, 55 Bar. Oh my gosh, I got 55 Bar residency.
I was going to ask you.
I want to start touring. It's just like step, 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 step. And so as I'm doing all these steps up the ladder, I was always still doing those background gigs, weddings, like I said, the restaurants. And the most beautiful part is there's two cool things that I want to tell you about those background gigs.
Yeah.
One is the way that I met my producer of How Love Begins, and the other one is how I got to Cincinnati in the first place.
Oh, God, okay.
And they both came from the same background
Really?
gig. So I played at the Red Eye Grill, which was across the street from Carnegie Hall. And I still haven't written the song, but it's supposed to be The Girl Who Plays Piano Across from Carnegie Hall. I got to write that tune.
I'm there for it. I'm there
And
for it.
I'm always in the background doing my thing, and the Sarah Vaughan competition had happened. But right before that, I was doing my thing in the background. There was this guy sitting at the bar, and he was like, I haven't heard someone sing Spring can really hang you up the most in years. And I was like, oh, you're a jazz fan? He's like, yeah, there's a great series that I run at the Behringer Crawford Museum in Covington, Kentucky. You should come. So he ended up, his name was Mark, and he ended up putting me in touch with the museum. I came, I played with a wonderful local guitarist, Brandon Coleman, and we ended up making a live record accidentally. So I have a Live at the Two-Headed Calf record in the Behringer Crawford Museum in Covington, which is so funny. From this thing, right?
From this one, hey, yeah.
And through that, that's how I met Paulina from Xavier University. That's why I'm back here in Cincinnati to play the Hearth Lounge. It's a beautiful, beautiful turn of events. And then the other side of the spectrum was right after the Sarah Vaughan competition, which you mentioned, which I, again, didn't win, but I placed. And as a former opera singer, I remember getting into the Sarah Vaughan competition and going, wow, that's not bad for an opera singer. I can't believe I got into this thing.
Who talked about Van Halen and the Pretenders. I can only imagine their faces, recoil,
Yeah, and I couldn't believe that they used that in the video part. I couldn't believe that they used it. And then I get up and I sing like Muddy Water or something. And
Oh, wow.
there's always looking for an excuse as to why, if someone who's skirting outside of the box isn't fitting inside the box. They're like, well, that's because she's X, Y. That's because he's X, Y.
And we can't have that.
We can't do that. It's too strange.
Don't pollute it.
Don't pollute the pool.
Which,
So
I think it's evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's another sidebar conversation.
So one of the judges was Christian McBride, one of the most legendary bass players that's
Yeah.
alive. And I didn't get to meet him. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. I didn't win the competition. I placed, whatever. I went right back to singing it. The Girl Who Sang Piano across from Carnegie Hall at the Red Eye Grill. I'm playing. It's a packed night. Nobody is listening. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to play Night Tunisia. I barely know this tune. I start playing it. And I was like, wow, it's so loud in here. No one's going to even notice if I do the bridge again. And so I started playing the bridge again because I messed up the first time. And all of a sudden I look up and Christian McBride is standing right there staring at me going, how do I know you? And I was like, oh my God, you're the most famous bass player in the world. He's like, I remember you from Sarah Vaughan. I remember you from the Sarah Vaughan competition. You sound really great. We should connect. And so he gives me his number, and then we were friends for 6 years.
Wow.
I never asked him for anything. He'd always say, we should do music together, and I was always under the impression that it's better to wait for the ask than to ask before you're ready. So I just kept waiting. And then when the pandemic hit, and I got my MBA of all things during the pandemic, I was like, I think now is the time for me to make the ask. So I said, will you please make an album with me? And he said it would be my honor. So he co-produced my album, How Love Begins. And that's the album that won the Grammy last year for Best Jazz Vocal Album. And I met him at the when I was playing backgrounds. That's why I said, that's why I talk about those gigs all the time. They're the best.
They're the best because truly that's where I've met some really great people that I've collaborated with. It's always the side gigs, and no one
side gigs.
But that's our game. This, I don't know the lack of a better word for it, but every artist and every art genre has to go through this world, that similar sort of thing. Like, well, let me do the art fairs. Let me do the group shows, and let me do I love that ladder theory. I think everybody needs to hold on to that.
You have to, because if you think you can just skip the line, that's where entitlement comes.
Right.
And that's where you skip the most beautiful part, which I think is the journey. I can't believe I just said that. That is so disgustingly positive. I am so gross.
I felt the saccharin.
I felt the saccharin, and that made me want to throw up. But I really mean it.
I know you mean it. That's what makes it great.
And as I like go back to my thing about the 90-second, 30-second thing, what I'm like really thinking about lately is that we're launching so many careers based on social media, based on virality, based on the algorithm, and not based on anyone's journey. So some of these kids that are blowing up, can they do a 90-minute set, or is it just a 90-second video? And what do they have to say for themselves? They haven't gone through anything at all in life. And
which adds to the texture of a voice and
Exactly.
a body moving through space, paint on a canvas.
it adds.
I'm with you on the 30 second, 90 second. Even
Yeah.
visual artists are doing that now.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
please stop.
Yeah, some of them are just natural geniuses, and some of them the algorithm picked it up, and it's hard to tell the difference these days, and it just takes away from those who are like trudging, and it also I say those words out loud. I said, dude, does it make me sound bitter because I had to trudge for 20 years before I got recognition? It's not bitter. It's just an awareness that things work much more against the artist's favor these years, and those who like the data lords and the algorithms choose, they might be able to skip the line. But skipping the line, it's like, what do you have to say for yourselves? You don't have anything you don't have a body of work to show yet.
I'm Bonnie Miles, Membership Coordinator of CET. Thank you for listening to Rodney Veal's Inspired By. This podcast is a production of CET and ThinkTV, 2 local PBS stations. As PBS stations, the work we do online, on air, and in the community is supported by listeners like you. If you're enjoying the show and would like to support our work, please consider becoming a member at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org. Plus, when you sign up to donate at least $5 a month, you'll get access to special members-only streaming videos on the PBS app through Passport. Learn more at cetconnect.org or thinktv.org.
If you're enjoying this conversation, The Art Show, also hosted by Rodney Veal, is available to stream anytime from anywhere on YouTube or the PBS app.
And isn't it, to me, I think it's a danger of crashing and burning.
Totally.
I'm like, why would you just slow your roll? The art making didn't get interesting until I was 40.
Yeah.
And when I had to retire, when my niece said, "You need to stop trying to do classical ballet,"
Right.
and I get it, I totally. But then I was like, just then, was like I finally understood the artistry of performing, and I had to stop. But then I realized you don't have to stop. You can go into another, because you're open to going. Let's try this postmodern world in grad school. I mean,
I love that. Yeah.
see, so I think that's why I fell in love with you instantaneously. I said, because it is about the journey. I think talk about that, because I think that needs to be so amplified to especially the audience that we speak to on the show. That it's you in it for the long haul. Are you prepared to do sun up to sundown, the gigs, the teaching? Then the night gig, then repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Are people ready for that?
And then the ones that aren't ready, yeah, it's this word that always comes back to me, the entitlement of deserving in an industry that is already inherently hard. So yeah, I know a lot of young students, or a lot of musicians that I know that came from wealth would never be caught dead doing a wedding, because they would call it like a sellout, or they wouldn't be caught dead doing a background gig because it's not good for their brand. I'm like, well, that's real nice that you don't have to pay your bills because mommy and daddy are paying for it. I'm like, are you kidding me? Wow. Some of us have to actually go and sing for our supper, literally. And you know what takes time? Singing for your supper. So that means that I don't have time to sit in front of a Ring camera and make content all day, because I have to pay my rent. And so I'm so irritated by the entitlement that comes with people now that I've had some success are like, how do I win a Grammy?
Oh my God. What?
And I'm like, I gaslit myself so hard for an entire year from feeling like people were so surprised that an independent artist won over these like apparently famous jazz singers. I'm like, what makes anybody famous? First of all, it's jazz. Like, do me a favor. Like, it's not like I beat Lady Gaga over here.
Right. It was like all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I kneecap Beyonce.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's jazz. No one. We have a tiny little niche. There's plenty of room for everybody. Just relax.
Relax, and absolutely. And so, why do people jump? Like I said, chase excellence, not gold. Why? I don't understand. Why would anyone want an award anyway?
You don't want it. I promise you don't want it. Now that I have it, I don't want it.
That was when I talked to Hannah Beekler, who was the production designer on Black Panther. She's from Dayton, Ohio. Okay, my hometown. I'm like,
amazing,
crazy. And she said it's like the gold is not all it's cracked up to be, because there are then expectations. Then there are these things of she can't do the gigging jobs.
Correct.
There is something to be said. Once you have that, then it's like, why are you? And then people question it. It's like, no, the music is the music. The dance is the dance. The production is the production. It's in our DNA. This is what we were meant to do. We are here. We're going to do it. But it's not always the.
I miss the background gigs so much because number one, they're fun. They're low stakes. I'm not in charge most of the time, you know.
Wow.
And the most important thing for me is that they're paid practice. I was like, I'm being paid to practice every time I do a background gig at the piano and singing, because if it's low stakes, I can be experimentative. And so many of the arrangements that I've done have come from me playing in the back of a bar.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to say that. Like, apparently it's, yeah.
Somehow it's like,
like, I can't believe that she has the audacity to admit that she likes Van Halen and she does weddings. Oh my God, she's not deserved to have this success. She's a fluke. No, she's not a fluke. She's a force. Just like eat what I'm serving to you. How many more times does someone have to prove themselves?
Right.
Until people are like, wow, she's.
Well, the thing is, I listen to your music, and one of the things I was listening to, and I realized, and you talked about wanting to be Whitney, and I talked about there were these little R&B inflections in your voice, and then there were, because I see we're all the stew, all the parts of the stew,
Melting pot of stew. Yeah.
melting pot of the stew comes through in your voice. I'm like, that's why.
Thanks.
To me, it's like, well, it's in the end product. What's the problem? I'm not a musician, but I am an artist. I'm a human being. I can respond when things are done well.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. When it's done well and it's done with the sort of the integrity that you approach to it. And what intrigued me was the fact that the inspiration for the album were the photographs of the environmental disaster in the Gulf. Talk about that, because that's layers.
Yeah, there's layers
subtextual
there.
layers there, yeah.
Well, I mean, every record I ever do, I have some sort of activism, whether it's mental health or animal rescue or whatever. And so I was looking at How Love Begins, and I was looking at all the words, and I saw a lot of imagery of oil, water, fire, smoke, and I was like, this there's a lot of disaster here. And it seems like oil and water don't mix. Okay, that's a little cliche. Where else can I go with this when I was building it out? And then I started to look for oil and water paintings or photos, and I saw really beautiful things, drops of water on a piece of concrete, when it turns all rainbow colors. I thought that was beautiful. That was one of the options. And then I saw what I thought was a painting, and I looked at it. I was like, wow, that is some beautiful colors. I've never seen colors like that. It's so amazing. And look at the boat in the middle of it. I can't get over it. And then I clicked on the image, and it was a aerial photograph by Daniel Beltra, this award-winning photographer of the Gulf of Mexico oil spill. And I was crushed by that, because I remember reading about the horrific environmental impact that oil spill had and still has, and how it was completely just a human disaster. And I thought, wow, this photograph is, and all the entire series is called Spill, and it's a beautiful series, and all of them are just stunning. And I said some of the most beautiful things in life are also the most heartbreaking. And I was like, that's what the album is about.
Yeah.
You know, so it's part one is how love begins, and part two is how love ends. And you know, there's also a bonus track where how it begins again, because you can't just think in like a triangle. You have to think circularly in a circle, otherwise you will fall into despair and forever.
Yeah. It's like doom and gloom was like, I give up.
Yeah, exactly. We got to think like a circle, everybody. It comes back around. So yeah, I saw that, and
It just kind of inspired this song.
Yeah, and I reached out to Save the Sound, because where I live in Connecticut, I live on Long Island Sound now, and you know, it's a beautiful estuary that feeds the rivers of Connecticut that's connected to New York, where I lived for 20 years. And we did like a day of activism, and I still work with Save the Sound to just draw attention to the importance of especially our waters. You know, as we're sitting here in Cincinnati, as the waters are flooding.
Yeah. Yeah, we've dealt with that here internally.
Yeah.
But that's and that was another thing that drew me, was the fact that you talked about, as artists, we're in service of this world we live in. It's not just the art, because the art is inspired. And then when you talk about service, I was like, that's what we're here for. We're servants on this planet, and we should be taking care of it. Right. And so this question of activism as an artist, and that's when people always talk about artists should never be activists. I'm like, okay, no. Nina Simone, yeah. I'm going to use her as my rock. Yeah,
exactly.
Harry Belafonte, Sidney Poitier. Come on.
Right.
Do the things that there's a way to serve this world in a better way with our talents. And does that give you that kind of resolve that this really beautiful album, which won a Grammy, testimony of the fact that, some people said talent, skill, there's depth.
The depth. Oh, I love that. Thank you.
So what do you say to artists who are constantly told not to speak up and speak out, and use that to inspire their work?
Well, I always say that art is best served with a side of activism. Something I've really started to think about, and I try to do, is to not make it a partisan issue with the activism that I choose. I like to speak on behalf of things that everybody should care about, no matter what side of the fence you sit on. Mm-hmm. That's not to say that I don't believe in choosing sides, because I've never been one to sit the fence. But when it comes to, trust me, it's like, you will know how I feel about whatever it is.
I love it. I love that.
But when it comes to like my art and the way that I speak up, like the environment is something that everybody should care about. It's not a right or left or anything. It's not a partisan issue. And the same thing goes with animal rescue, mental illness, all these things. If you can think of them from a way to unite people as opposed to divide, because I feel like we're so divided as it is. I was just down in DC yesterday doing Grammys on the Hill, which is where creators in leadership roles and music professionals, we go down and we lobby Congress for different acts and bills to take place. And one of the congressmen, Dan Goldman from New York, of all places, and also my district where I used to live in Park Slope, Brooklyn, he said that in such trying times, what he wants to remind people is that it's the issues that unite us is the only way for us to come back from the insane divide. And so arts, education, arts funding, absolutely, arts in general is something that everybody should think about and benefit from. And so as an activist who actively tries to give back through my art, I try and keep that in mind as much as I can.
Okay. So it's a thing. So a little bit of a pivot, but it's still not. You were teaching. Mm. It said you taught. You were teaching. Are you still teaching at the same? I mean,
I'm clinging on. My poor kids. If they, I don't, not like they listen to my interviews, but if you listen, no, I don't teach privately right now because the touring schedule is so bananas. That's impossible. I let go of one of my university gigs, and I'm holding on to NYU. So I teach at NYU 1 day a week. And the beautiful thing about my NYU teaching and my students is that they're thrilled to have a teacher who's out there doing it.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they don't mind doing makeups outside of school hours as long as, they want to see a picture of me at Capitol Hill holding a sign like equal rights for musicians and be like, that's my teacher.
Yes, because she's fighting a good fight.
But because I grew up with such wonderful teachers, there's this immense guilt that I feel when I'm touring. I'm sure that you can understand.
Oh,
I'm just like, my kids. I gotta go back to my kids.
How do I fit this in? It was like, how do I make it work? Yeah,
because I had educators that healed and also just gave me above and beyond the 1 hour lesson. Wow. So I think
that's a real shout out to teachers because I really feel strongly about that. I love, I'm 60, so the shocking thing is having taught someone 40 years ago. And their kids, I've taught their kids.
Wow.
It's like, oh wow.
That's so beautiful.
And I'm like, you do. This matters. And so you kind of
it matters.
You kind of want to make sure you do it right because you don't muck up someone's. That's not the.
Especially in the arts.
Especially in the
you can
arts.
say one thing and you can ruin someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of curious because the demons of doubt. Whenever I have them or they're manifested externally, it's because of something someone said to me.
Correct.
I was like, wow. I don't know if you're like me. I've held on to these comments.
Words cut deep.
In my journal. I'm going to go, Rodney, you got to let go. But then I realized, no, because that is what fueled you to say, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to figure out how to get past this demon on my shoulder because my favorite phrase is not today, Satan. I go,
don't date Satan.
No, not today, Satan.
Oh, not today. I was like, don't date Satan. I'm like,
well,
it's funny because
that's personal. That's our dating show. Hey, folks, don't date Satan.
I'm going to write that song.
If your friends describe your date as Satan,
maybe it's time to pull out.
You might want to rethink it. Is this going to be long term?
Okay, you said not today, Satan.
Not today,
Got
Satan. Like I said, I have to have I firmly believe you got to have fun. You said the industry's hard enough. And the work is hard enough, so I better have some laughter.
Okay, but you cannot laugh through it.
Yeah, because there are moments. I love it.
I told I was just doing speaking of teaching, an artist in residence in the Netherlands of all places.
Wow.
And one of the kids, I told my story, which essentially is just an epitaph of rejection. And then now only some great things that and I'm not afraid to share the stories of the rejection because I really believe that people need to hear that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it's also totally worth it because you're doing what you're doing without having regrets. And one of the kids said, like, now that you've told us your story, how did you keep doing it?
Yeah, well, that's
and back to what you just said. There's like that voice, this like healthy dose of competition in my brain that was like, who are you to say what someone can or cannot do? And like you have to have at least enough belief in yourself that you go. Someone says no, you go, thank you for your no. I'm gonna try again. But I'll try from a different angle. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So every time I got a no, I would pivot. Every time I got a no, I would pivot. And that's why I did it. I was in a folk band. I was in a rock band. I was in a blues band. I was
was
living in India. All of a sudden, I'm teaching in odd meters. Like, I didn't know anything about anything. I just would pivot.
Just kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I got. It's like this whole notion of pivoting, which is, yeah, who are they to say no? Which is so bizarre. I remember my favorite line. Who's turned out to be one of my favorite people in the world. This professor at OSU. She said, "You've gotten by in your considerable charm. We're going to help you." I was like, "Wow,
That is brutal.
I was like, "Whoa!"
It's a backhanded compliment.
It's a backhanded compliment, but
Mostly.
it was like, okay, you better start digging deep, brother. it was. I understood, but I also understood that I have to be me, and so what is this journey of me? Which is the hardest part when you're making art, which is an extension of you and all your life experience, and then someone's got to have a comment about it. So how do you deal with that? Because my response is like, now I'm 60, I don't care. I really
I know. A lot of it is
whatever.
is ripping the Band-Aid off. Like how you build a tolerance to the pain eventually, because how many more times can you rip a Band-Aid before you're just like, okay, well, whatever. There's still things that people say that will really bother me, and mostly things that really bother me is when people take insult to character. As opposed, I don't really care if you don't like my music, and if you don't like my lyric writing, if you don't like the way that my voice sounds, but character.
What's wrong with that?
Character is something that I really.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
And I don't think people really understand that you have to divorce the two.
Yeah.
When you're, be careful. I said to our audience, be careful with the things you say to our artists and art makers, because we're so open. That's the hard part. It's like,
Yeah.
You don't understand how open I am right now. I am vulnerable. I'm exposed.
And when you get to a level, going back to the awards thing, like when you get to the level where you win an award but you didn't, people throw stones at people from the top, and there becomes a time where it used to just be like, oh, like nobody cares. Let's say you don't dig the way that I write, right? But now it's like, well, she only won because X. Or because she did X, and I'm like, wow, this is a completely different side of the industry that people don't talk about, because once you get to a certain level, it can be a really wild thing. So what I've done is just held on to the fact that the one thing in life that I do well and that I love to do is to create. So I've already written my next record. It's already coming out. Wow. I've released, since How Love Begins, multiple albums, and I don't put pressure on myself to have them be the next big thing, because if you put all your eggs into the basket and you only shoot for the gold and as opposed to for the excellence, then you'll never be happy again, and you'll just be pushing and pushing and pushing and just feeding the noise. So I released 2 things called like Siren Songs, which is just for fun, and I even put it on my website. I was like, just so you know, this is not my big follow-up. It's giving me joy, because that's what I do. I make music. And my husband's record that won the Grammy, I can't believe I say these things out loud, for Best Large Jazz Ensemble.
Yeah.
That was just like, we were shocked. We were absolutely floored when we got nominated in 2 categories. We're like, but this is when you realize that the naysayers are this small, tiny little part, and they're the loudest, but the silent majority are good, warm, amazing people who see you for who you are,
and they want you to succeed.
It's beautiful.
It is, and that's about. I mean, so it's not. We don't have to be afraid of the saccharine. I always thought a phrase I used to someone. We can wallow in the cynicism, or I can prance around in the joy.
Yeah, I love it.
Got 2 options here. Oh my God, I choose to prance.
I love prancing. Yes.
Like why shouldn't you release a pop album? Why should you not? Why would you? Because I looked at some of the people you've done background. We collaborated with like Darren Criss, Nikki Giovanni, which got me. I was like,
man, that was a real honor. And then to have her pass, oh my gosh, she's such an icon. When Javon Jackson asked me to do that, it's because Nikki was supposed to sing those songs, and then she was not feeling well. This is at the beginning of when she was starting to not feel well over the summer. And so he called me. He's like, I really want to put this record out will you just come and sing these songs? And I was like, I cannot believe I get to be on a record with Nikki Giovanni. This is like one of the greatest honors of my life.
Wow.
Yeah, to have lost such a deeply, beautiful artist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's real. And so, do you always feel like you pinch yourself every time it's like this new experience? Like you do that, like I can't believe I get to do this. I pinch myself all the time. Which
totally, it absolutely outweighs all the negative feedback loop that has been going on in my brain for 20 years. These moments, I go, wow, it was worth it. It's worth it. There's the journey, all the bumps, the journey. We're back to the journey.
It's always about the journey. This is always about the journey. I love it. There's a person that we actually know in common, and because you played at the Savannah Symphony Orchestra. Do you know Kotaro Harada?
How do you know Kotaro?
Because he's the new conductor of the Dayton Philharmonic.
Don't you dare!
Yes, I'm dead serious.
We gotta send him a selfie.
Yes, we do. Because I'm on the board.
No, you don't.
Yes.
I want to come sing with you.
Yes, I will. As a board member, I can kind of put a good word in. But that's a part of the journey. Along the journey, it's not even just the making; it's the people you get to hang around.
That is bananas.
When I saw that, I was like, "Wait a minute, we know this same person," and he is the coolest dude.
Yeah, he's very talented.
He is very stylish. He's very
super stylish.
Sorry to be like superficial, but he's super. He knows his stuff.
No, he does.
He is,
sure.
But he's also fun to be around.
Yeah, he's ready for the party. We kept missing each other in Savannah. Now I know I got to get out.
You got to come to Dayton. You got to come to Dayton. Come on.
I'm ready.
So we're going to wrap this conversation up. I'm enjoying myself, but we had a show.
I guess I got to go get ready for my show.
You got to get ready to sing. I mean, that's
I forgot.
You got things to do.
I had a TV interview this morning. Now I have you. It was just such a delight. And then I got a show, and at some point I'm going to drink another cup of coffee.
You will. There's good coffee around here.
Oh, good.
But I always like to ask because because it's inspired by what would be your word of advice to anyone? You get this last moment.
Oh, gosh.
I know. I'm setting it up as monumental, I know. but you get to say, like, what would you say to someone who, I always think about parents who are concerned about their kids who say, I want to be a musician or a dancer or artist. And, as an educator, I taught K through 12. So I taught in that world. I could see the hand wringing and the, this world. What would you do to kind of calm? What would you say to them about this journey?
There are so many jobs in the music industry to be had. Even behind the scenes, that's just as important as the person on stage. There's, going into the arts doesn't necessarily mean that you have to decide to be like the singer or the musician. Like, there's so many opportunities to live and work within the art space that are just as fulfilling as being a performer. Mm-hmm. So, when people talk down about going into the arts, it's like, oh man, but there's so many opportunities to work in music and film and TV and all that stuff. But the other thing I would say is that if you could see yourself doing anything else, go do that and keep the joy of music, and don't feel like you failed just because you didn't do it full time. Like, if you have a day job and you're doing music at night, you're still an artist. I really believe this with my full bones. Like, it goes back to what I was saying before about people looking down at you for doing weddings. It's like, that was my day job. Like, everyone has to do what they need to do to pay their bills. You're not less of an artist just because you do a day job. And the third thing I'll say is, back to the journey, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So just keep to the path and keep pounding the pavement, and then, carve in your own lane and just do the thing that brings you joy. That's it. That's all.
And that was a mic drop. Nicole, I have had so much fun. This is a blast.
You are so great. I want to stay. We could stay forever.